discover how a humble farmer exposed an incredible truth. Paying for the worst room transformed Joe Thompson's life forever. Joe Thompson stood in the chilling dusk, staring at the worn-out sign of the dilapidated inn that had become his only option. The Barnacle Inn, it read, with peeling paint that mirrored the forlorn expression etched on his face. He refused to believe how a few months of suffering could coerce him into making such a drastic decision to showcase his farm's produce in exchange for a night at this rundown place. His heart weighed heavy as he thought of Lily and Sam, their innocent faces reminding him of what he was fighting for. Yet the nostalgic dreams of a flourishing farm felt lost beneath layers of grief and exhaustion. Each crop he tended felt like a ghost of his late wife, Margaret, haunting him, mocking his struggles. How had he gotten so far from the joyful shouts of children playing in fields covered with golden grains? Lily's laughter had filled the farmhouse, but now the decrepit walls reverberated only with his sorrow. Memories pressed upon him like a grainy film, blurring his present reality. In this town, the Thompsons had thrived for generations, farmers proud of their land. But as he stepped inside the inn, the air stagnant with neglect, that pride faltered. Joe could already sense the undertow of despair. This was not the ancestry he wanted for his children. Yet every day he woke feeling like a ghost adrift in a storm. The innkeeper, a rotund man with disheveled hair, had welcomed him with a glance that said he, too, had seen better days. Joe traversed the inn's darkened corridors later that night, fatigue and restlessness twining inside him. Each creak of the floorboards resonated with memories that tugged at his heart. As he stumbled across the remnants of what looked like forgotten files, hidden away beneath a battered table, curiosity peeked through his weariness. What could these dusty documents offer? As he shuffled them open, his pulse quickened. Insights of corruption and betrayal spilled forth, revealing a web of deceit woven by the town's elite landowners intent on squeezing out farmers like him. Panic flared. Was this real? Tendrils of conflicting emotions coiled tightly around his throat. How could he risk everything he had? His children needed him. Each time he thought about raising the issue, a shiver of dread clutched his muscles. The notion of being a whistleblower exposing the very people who could cause ruin or ruin his children's lives was a perilous gamble. But was staying silent any better? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Visions of his father's resolve haunted him, the echoes of mantras about fairness and morality pressing in every direction. Mr. Jenkins, the town elder, had sat with him just the day before, sharing bittersweet stories of resilience. Those tales ignited a flicker of fortitude deep within Joe, but it vacillated against the wall of fear he faced now. Standing before the town hall, the weight of expectations, whispers, and judgments would drown him. This turmoil conjured chaos in him, as if he were tied to a barrel and tossed into a raging river, drowning not just in doubt but in a longing for justice. With trembling hands, he police-adjusted collar and rubbed a nervous palm down his jeans. As he stood before the crowd at the meeting, the air was electric, each eye fixated on him, their hopes hanging like a delicate mist. The truth beckoned bold and dangerous. But could he grip it long enough to face what lay ahead? The moment hung heavy, like the bittersweet memories of brighter days. Would he rise to expose the reality lurking just beneath the surface of his world? Joe's heart raced as he faced the gathering, the weight of every accusatory whisper pulsing in his mind. Would they rally behind him? He tightened his grip on the papers, an anchor in the torrent of uncertainty swirling around him. A single deep breath. His mother always said that courage began with a decision. This was it. His resolve flickered like a candle caught in the wind, but he would not let it extinguish. The dishonor the elite oligarchs had wrought upon his small community clamored for attention. With each glance from the townsfolk, he felt their collective desperation, a mirror of his own. They had lived through seasons of hardship, yet hope clung stubbornly by its fingertips. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing ominously through the stillness. The words hung like a fragile thread, buoyed on the precipice of action. Yet inside him a storm brewed. The revelation of the rotten core underlying the town's economic despair was a blade that could carve their futures. But could it be aimed at the right targets? Could he shoulder that responsibility without losing everything? In the crowd's silence, he heard the muted cries for justice, hidden within each anxious breath. This was not just his struggle. It was a shared plight, a collective anguish. Joe felt the weight of generations behind him, farmers whose dreams had been bled dry. He wasn't just Joe Thompson anymore. He was their voice, their shield. His lips parted again, this time with stronger conviction. I found documents that show how deep the corruption runs. The words spilled forth, gaining momentum like an avalanche. Each phrase was a dagger aimed at the complacency that had afflicted his town. They planned to squeeze out farmers like us, to rob our children of the legacy we built, forged from sweat and sacrifice. The murmurs rose, a hesitant symphony of apprehension and intrigue. Some faces turned white with fear, while others glinted with nascent hope. He could almost see the mental gears shifting, how this could change their lives, their survival. Joe sensed the need for clarity. He needed a plan. Exposure was a complex, tangled web. What if he failed? The repercussions could be dire, but was there an option to reclaim their dignity without risk? He envisioned a strategy, a calculated maneuver involving the very letters that now trembled in his hands. He could gather support, gain trust, create a coalition against the tyranny of local wealth. As the voices began to rise, he felt emboldened. I will not let my children inherit a broken dream, one that's been shattered by greed. As his heart surged, Joe envisioned the future beyond his fears, a cooperative endeavor where farmers banded together, sharing resources and knowledge instead of falling prey to isolation. The very fabric of their community had to be rewoven with threads of trust and mutual benefit. Yet, lurking behind each question was that shadow of doubt. What if those he sought to enlighten turned against him, pulled by the loom of influence and fear? Exposing the truth would change not only the town's landscape but also the landscape within Joe himself. Did he have the fortitude to bridge that divide? The evening slipped into silhouettes, shadows breathing uncertainty, but also urging him onward. Staying still meant accepting defeat. The time had come to face the consequences, his own personal reality that had been meticulously crafted from trauma, yet now gleamed with unexpected clarity. Tomorrow would demand action, and Joe understood that simply sharing the truth was the first step. He needed to prepare not just for exposure but for the pushback that would surely come. It wasn't just about the documents. It was about becoming the leader that the town needed, a role he hadn't expected. The moment of truth was unavoidable, looming ahead like a storm cloud, but within that storm, perhaps lay the salvation he sought. What would Joe uncover when he stepped into the light and let his voice carry the weight of this newfound resolve? Darkness still loomed, and the struggle for integrity would soon commence. His heart raced with anticipation and dread. What awaited him on the other side of truth? Joe woke before dawn, the weight of the previous night's revelations still heavy on his shoulders. The flicker of uncertainty had morphed into an insistent pulse of determination. Each moment spent at the gathering had nudged him toward an undeniable truth. The path he'd chosen would demand more than just courage. It would require astuteness and resilience. He padded softly around his home, mindful of the fragile stillness enveloping his family. The night had been restless, churned by thoughts of the documents and the truth he was prepared to reveal. As the sun began to breach the horizon, casting a golden hue over their small farm, Joe's mind raced through potential scenarios. The townspeople's reactions bubbled in his consciousness, each face morphing into a potential ally or adversary. Could he truly inspire them to rally with him, or would fear bind their tongues? He was not just a farmer anymore. The role he was about to assume loomed larger than life itself. With resolve, Joe brewed coffee and strengthened his shifting resolve with each sip. Exposure seemed a monumental task, its risks primed to unleash chaos. Yet the idea of standing idly by while his community faced betrayal stiffened his spine. He grabbed a notepad and began to formulate his plan. First, he needed solid evidence to accompany his voice, something more than mere words. A strategy was forming a series of meetings with farmers, dispelling lingering doubts and building relationships grounded in trust. They had to unite against the unseen grip of corruption. The thought of outreach sent an electric buzz through him. Joe would leverage the trust he built over the years. Loneliness had been his quiet companion in this fight, but now he understood he wasn't alone. He would approach each farmer on an individual basis, sharing what he had discovered, feeling out their willingness to join the collaborative resistance he envisioned. His gaze flickered to the mailbox, an unobtrusive structure that bore the weight of messages, letters penned with longing and despair. It served as a reminder that he was part of something bigger, each letter reflective of dreams, aspirations, and fears. Perhaps he could start there. A carefully crafted letter to fellow farmers calling them to an initial gathering of sorts, a private discussion designed to ease them into this reality. What if he could expose the oligarchs not by a loud uproar but through a united front of quiet resolve? Picking up the pen, he wrote feverishly, detailing the betrayal they faced but framing it as a stepping stone toward recapturing their future. Each stroke imbued with urgency, yet underscored by his newfound understanding of the delicate balance that defined their existence. As he sealed the letters, an unfamiliar sensation flickered through him, a blend of anxiety and excitement. Would this engagement truly lead to the collective strength he envisioned? Could they find it within themselves to stand for what was right? Instinctively, he understood they would need coaxing, encouragement, an anchor in this storm. Returning indoors, he contemplated stepping into the public realm. The danger loomed even there. The oligarchs had a way of silencing dissent with their affluence. Would they turn on him before he had a chance to expose them? The fear fanned like flames in his chest, threatening to consume his nascent resolve. But alongside the fear was that glimmer of something potent, empowerment manifested through knowledge and action. He wasn't prepared to allow the elite to dictate who they could be. The mere thought of his children inheriting a legacy tainted by tyranny ignited a fierce determination. Today would be momentous. He would embark on this path not just as a farmer, but as a leader, one capable of wielding the truth to carve a new destiny. Still, obstacles awaited, lingering like the storm clouds that now loomed overhead. As he stepped outside, the breeze carried a crisp chill, a reminder of the uncertainty that awaited. The undertones of fear were still present, but now mingled with the sweet scent of opportunity generation. Joe took a deep breath and tightened his grip on the letters. The path ahead might be fraught with danger, yet the pressing need for truth eclipsed his doubts. He needed to forge ahead. But in the shadows, unobserved, a pair of calculating eyes had been watching him closely. Joe was now pivotal in a game bigger than he could have imagined, and the consequences of his actions were set to unfurl dramatically. What would he do when confrontation loomed and the very foundations of his resolve were tested? The moment to uncover the truth was near, but Joe had yet to discover the real threat standing against him. As the morning light cast a warm glow across the fields, Joe inhaled deeply, bracing himself for the day ahead. His heart raced as he walked towards the mailbox. The letters clutched tightly in his hand like lifelines. Each step toward the fence felt weighted with the potential to inspire, to protect, and perhaps to ignite a fire that had long been dormant in the town. He slid the letters into the mailbox, allowing a brief moment of reflection to wash over him. The act felt monumental. Small pieces of paper now held the possibility of changing lives. However, as he turned back toward his house, a simmering sense of vulnerability crept in, nudging him to reconsider. What if the very act of honesty he sought to embody drew unwanted attention? The shadow of the oligarchs loomed large, and the idea of their retaliation gnawed at him. Joe steadied himself, drawing on the resilience that had become his newfound armor. Deliberate and methodical, he began to formulate the next steps, his mind a complex machine whirring with strategy. He would need allies, but convincing his fellow farmers wouldn't happen overnight. An epiphany jolted through him. He wouldn't just impart information. He would create a narrative, molding the truth into something they could rally around. He resolved to become an architect of change, not just a vessel of truth. A ripple of confidence surged through him as he decided to visit old friends, people he'd worked with side by side on the land. Each one was seasoned with years of toil and understanding, their lives intertwined with the earth. Yet, they were also infused with caution, a survival instinct honed by years of crushing blows from self-serving forces. He realized that he must tread carefully, speaking not just to inform but to evoke a sense of shared fate. Gathering himself, Joe took the truck. The familiar roads felt both comforting and oppressive, a reminder of the invisible barriers that had held him and his neighbors back for too long. Every bump in the gravel path was a metaphor for his journey. Rough, unpredictable, yet undeniably part of a larger journey. As he pulled up to the first farm, he was greeted by the sight of his friend, Emma. Her weathered face was etched with lines of concern, an unmistakable reflection of the town's collective anxiety. The conversation flowed easily, but Joe felt the weight of his own words hanging in the air, poised to either unveil the truth or deepen their fear. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Joe, you're scaring me. What's going on?" she replied, worry creeping into her tone. He explained his findings, carefully choosing his language. He couldn't afford to trigger panic. He needed unity to emerge from the truth, not division. As he spoke, he looked into her eyes, searching for signs of understanding or resistance. The glint of realization sparked within her, and they began to plot the groundwork together. Every conversation brought forth new challenges. Some farmers were receptive, others skeptical, but all of them were burdened by their connections to the land and each other. Joe recognized a pattern. Fragmented trust forged through the years faced the potential of unifying under a shared cause. It was his task to build a bridge strong enough to hold them all. Yet as the day drew on, unsettling feelings clawed at him. He couldn't shake the sensation of being followed, shadows flitting just beyond his periphery. After each encounter, the specter of their unyielding power threatened to engulf his aspirations. The fear of retribution grew more visceral. It was more than just a nagging concern. Returning home that evening, he sensed a shift within himself. This wasn't merely a community concern anymore. It had morphed into his personal quest. A seed of transformation had rooted deep within him, and with it came an intricate web of responsibility. Suddenly, a realization struck him: he would need to confront the oligarchs head-on, to forge a plan not just to withstand their grip but to unearth their vulnerability as well. Their arrogance was their Achilles heel, and Joe now saw it with evolving clarity. What if he could expose them not just to those around him but to the wider world? The thought, both terrifying and exhilarating, ignited a fiery resolve within him. The endgame had shifted. What had begun as a local concern might soon escalate into a higher-stakes battle. In the distance, a storm brewed, casting shadows over the horizon. A storm was approaching, both in the skies and in the realm of his escalating struggle. Joe felt an embodiment of courage swirling inside him, ready to face what lay ahead. His confrontation with the forces that sought to undermine them was tormenting yet exhilarating. But the stakes were rising, and the oligarchs were not mere spectators in this game. They were poised to strike back before Joe even had the chance to unveil the truth. Would he find the means to stand his ground when the time came, or would he falter under the weight of the imminent conflict? As dawn broke, the storm clouds still lingered ominously over the fields, casting a shadow on Joe's resolve. He sat at his kitchen table, the remnants of a half-eaten breakfast untouched, more preoccupied with strategies than sustenance. Each bite left him feeling heavier, as if each morsel further anchored him to a life he was desperately trying to change. His mind raced, energizing him yet exhausting him simultaneously. The letter he'd mailed yesterday was just the beginning. The familiarity of the kitchen, the worn wooden table, the creaky chair was overshadowed by foreboding uncertainty. He had to transform the fear he felt into a catalyst for action. He would spend the day mapping out his approach, assessing allies and potential avenues to diminish the oligarch's influence. Joe grabbed a piece of paper and began drafting a list of farmers, neighbors, and friends. He scribbled their names along with notes about their strengths and hesitations. Emma was an obvious ally, a visionary in her own right, someone whose passion for the land rivaled his own. But who else could he trust to stand beside him? Who would be willing to risk everything for a fight they might not win? As Joe contemplated this, he felt a surge of determination to refine his message. He realized he needed to speak their language, illustrating the risks their cooperative farming tradition faced under threat from the oligarchs. Joe envisioned not just a confrontation, but a collective awakening. They needed the rationalization that this wasn't just about personal loss, but about something far more significant: their legacy, their way of life, their children's futures. With a deep breath, he pushed aside the weight of his apprehensions. Maybe this was the moment he had been preparing for. He had spent years working the fields, understanding the land, and connecting with those who toiled beside him. It was time to convey that the very ground they stood on was being undermined by those who didn't care about tradition, only profit. The day pressed on, blending into conversations that oscillated from hope to skepticism. At each stop, Joe felt the tides of fear and trust shift between him and his old friends. Each dialogue forced him to confront hidden prejudice and entrenched fears, and discoveries about his influence flickered through him like electrical sparks. But with every pulse of confidence came palpable doubt. The shadows stalking him persisted. He often caught glimpses of figures watching from afar, silencing the innovative thoughts racing through his mind. Were they sending a message, warning him to abandon his crusade? He realized the stakes were not just about ideas or future imaginations. They were personal, pivotal, teetering on the brink of safety and danger. With dusk edging in, he felt the stirring call of commitment. The walls around him seemed to close in as clarity cut through his fog of uncertainty. He needed to confront the oligarchs head-on. He would gather the evidence he had amassed: the contracts, the hidden debts, the overlooked regulations. He could highlight their hubris. The idea grew into a solid plan, pulsating in his veins. Each piece of information could be the tool he needed to arm himself and the town's people against their inevitable backlash. Arriving home, he flipped through the files he decollected, their contents sharp and unwavering, a testament to the oligarch's greed. But just as he began to feel the thrill of his plan, an unsettling thought struck. What if he was merely digging his grave deeper? The silence surrounding his house felt charged and heavy, foreboding. The clock ticked, its sound echoing his spiraling anxiety. His heart raced. He couldn't shake the image of those men who held so much power. With everything in the balance, the time had come to execute his plan, an act that could either liberate them or shackle him to new nightmares. Ultimately, one question hung over him like the dark clouds without any exit. Would he possess the courage to unveil the truth when the moment arrived, or would he remain enveloped in the shadows of his fear? The answer beckoned, fiery yet ambiguous. Joe woke the next morning, resolve intertwining with trepidation like twisted roots gripping the soil. The early light breached his curtains, illuminating the remnants of his scattered notes. As he prepared for the day ahead, a sense of urgency gripped him. He felt a layer of himself shift, the realization that he was no longer just a farmer. He was now a voice, a vector of change navigating the labyrinth of apprehension that shadowed his purpose. The morning air was sharp, and each breath felt like a new beginning. He crossed the threshold into the day, the weight of his previous hesitations still fresh, yet diminished. He made his way to the fields, where the land, though uninterrupted by man, echoed the subtle reminders of his efforts. The robust greens and browns vibrated with potential. If any reflection warranted consideration, it was the land's testament to resilience against erosion, and for once, Joe felt it mirroring his own growing strength. As he traversed the farmland, he mentally rehearsed conversations he anticipated having. Would he induce fear with the evidence he harbored, or inspire determination? Picturing each face, he felt the gravity of their challenges weighing on his shoulders, but he held fast, determined to articulate a vision greater than individual burdens. His heart raced as he considered the first challenge he would face: the meetings he had arranged with the farmers in the area. The morning passed in preparation. Joe crafted a speech that would weave together facts and emotions, presenting the evidence not as just numbers but as a narrative of survival. His determination solidified. He understood this wasn't merely about fighting the oligarchs. It was a battle for their legacy, their children, their autonomy. Each statement had to resonate like a lifeline thrown in turbulent waters. When the hour of his first meeting arrived, apprehension clawed at him. He stood before his fellow farmers, gathered in the large barn, a setting familiar yet steeped in tension. Their faces reflected a mosaic of concerns, fears, and unvoiced skepticism, which only fueled Joe's resolve. "Thank you all for coming," he started, his voice gaining strength with each word. "We're at a precipice. This isn't only about today but the future we leave for the next generation." His voice wavered slightly as he detailed the impacts the oligarchs had on their livelihoods, unveiling pieces of evidence that sent ripples of disbelief through the crowd. But soon, concern morphed into confrontation. Linda, a longtime rival, challenged him. "What do you expect us to do? Fight windmills? These men have power. You think our voices matter?" For a moment, Joe faltered. Doubt crept back into his thoughts. Was he truly making a difference? Or was he merely raising false hopes? That momentary lapse could have consumed him, but he grasped it as an opening. "I understand your fears. I feel them every day. But if we don't stand up now, we lose everything: our homes, our way of life. We have something they can't take from us: the land, our knowledge." As he spoke, he immersed himself deeper in conviction, and for each challenge he faced, a steel resolve coalesced inside him. What if he was precisely the change agent needed? Each soul in the barn fluctuated between skepticism and inspiration, and in that ebb and flow, he saw reflections of his own struggle. Yet even amid this rising momentum, unnoticed shadows lurked outside the barn, figures observing, a constant reminder of the threats bound to emerge. Their presence reminded Joe of the stakes involved. After the meeting, Joe felt an unlikely camaraderie starting to form, a fragile bond born from distrust that slowly shaped into respect. Conversations between individuals no longer felt so tense. He saw flickers of potential ignite in their hearts. But just as the energy of the gathering evolved, so did his internal conflict. Was he truly ready to pursue this path, knowing the potential dangers? He would have to confront more than just the financial greed. It could lead to a more personal reckoning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the shadows deepened. A chill ran down his spine when a figure appeared at the barn entrance, a familiar silhouette, one that left him uncertain of their intentions. The moment felt pivotal. Would this encounter propel him forward, or would it signal a retreat from the very conviction he fought to foster? Joe's breath quickened, anticipation swirling. The next steps awaited, potent and heavy with consequence. Joe squinted against the fading light, recognizing the figure at the entrance. It was Mike, an old acquaintance whose presence often seemed to weave complications rather than resolutions. A knot settled in Joe's stomach as memories surfaced of their last confrontation, one steeped in ambition and competition. "Mike," he said, attempting to keep his voice steady. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you were making waves," Mike replied, a smirk creeping onto his lips. "Thought I'd come see what all the fuss is about." As they locked eyes, Joe felt the weight of Mike's incredulity. It struck a chord. How often had he found himself questioning his own capabilities? But the skepticism he sensed from Mike galvanized Joe's determination. Tonight, he stood not just for himself. He embodied the collective frustration of the farmers who'd grown weary of complacency. Mike continued, his tone patronizing, "You're stirring something dangerous. The oligarchs don't take kindly to insubordination." Joe considered the truth in Mike's words. Uncertainty echoed in his mind. He understood the stakes at play. The oligarchs were powerful, yes, but fear was no longer an option. He had seen firsthand the flickering hope within the group at the barn moments ago, and he clung to that. "Maybe," Joe countered, his voice low yet firm, "but what's the alternative? We can either allow ourselves to be trampled or start reclaiming what's ours. I refuse to let fear dictate our future." The tension thickened in the air, a lingering silence that felt charged. Joe watched as Mike absorbed his words. An internal battle flickered in his expression. Joe realized that this moment was his chance not just to challenge Mike but to confront his own insecurities. "Listen, Joe," said Mike, dropping the facade momentarily. "I know you've got heart. But heart doesn't pay the bills. Those men out there will crush you. You need a strategy." "Heart is a strategy," Joe asserted, feeling a surge of confidence in voicing his belief. "Without passion, what's left? You think I'm ignorant of the risks? I'm afraid every day, Mike. But if I don't speak up, who will? If I fail, at least I'll know I stood for something." A flicker of respect crossed Mike's eyes, though it was fleeting. "Just make sure that something isn't your ruin," he advised. "Everyone's watching you now. Not just the farmers. The oligarchs, they want to crush defiance before it spreads." Joe nodded. He knew this was not just a mere coincidence that Mike had appeared. It was a reckoning. The exchange was both challenging and refocusing, each word clarifying his purpose and reaffirming his path forward. As Mike turned to leave, Joe felt a strange mix of gratitude and foreboding. Perhaps he had learned more about himself in this encounter than he realized. He had faced an opponent and emerged more resolute, more clear in his ambitions than he ever thought he could be. The barn stood dimly illuminated as he re-entered, where the discussion among the farmers continued, newfound vigor flowing through their conversations. Their faces glimmered with reflections of courage, manifesting his hope. Could they truly galvanize themselves into something formidable? Yet, the shadows outside remained, more than just an abstract threat. They felt palpable, tightening around him like a warning. Joe's heart raced at the thought of what came next. Could he dig deeper into this resolve, amplify unity even against the strength of fear? In that moment of clarity, he understood the battle lay not just in the external fight against the oligarchs but within, too. It was a race against time to shape his own mindset, to nurture the burgeoning belief in himself and those around him. The evening sun extinguished itself behind the horizon, leaving only a shadow of uncertainty lying in wait. What actions would he take next? The moment loomed as Joe peered into the darkening world outside, aware that the dawn of a new struggle awaited. Would it foster destruction or become the catalyst for unprecedented change? The answer hung thicker than the night air, requiring courage to unravel. As the barn door creaked shut behind him, Joe took a moment to absorb the atmosphere that clung to the barn like the scent of hay and diesel. The murmurs of his fellow farmers bounced off the walls, swirling together into a fervent dialogue that stirred him. Each voice carried threads of doubt, frustration, and a flicker of courage that ignited his own. Joe leaned against a pillar, trying to blend into the background while simultaneously emerging from the shadows of self-doubt. Just moments ago, he faced Mike, navigating the choppy waters of competition and ambition. Yet, here among these farmers, the sense of shared purpose fueled a different kind of fire within him. Did everyone hear what Joe said about those oligarchs? A voice piped up. It was Clara, a determined woman who led the local co-op. "Yes, right. We can't keep playing safe. We need to find a way to push back." A unity he hadn't felt before began to take shape in their conversations. Tentative ideas turned into robust plans as individuals banded together in solidarity. Joe felt himself swept along in the tide, invigorated by Clara's declaration. Yet behind that enthusiasm, uncertainty gnawed at his resolve. The oligarchs were more than just wealthy adversaries. They represented an entire system that Jorge believed was rigged against them. A sudden rush of panic threatened to unravel his newly found conviction. Had he truly thought they could rise against such intimidation? "Maybe we should strategize some outreach?" Joe blurted out, surprising even himself with the proposal. If people knew what was happening here, they'd have to take notice. A few heads nodded vigorously. Some bold murmurs echoed his suggestion. His heart soared briefly. Perhaps he had something meaningful to offer after all. Yet the gnawing doubts resurfaced. Would outreach bring retaliation? Would he be endangering his friends and neighbors by setting this chain of events in motion? "Outreach?" Clara challenged, tilting her head. "You think those in power would listen? They will view us as an annoyance, a pest to eradicate. It would be risky." When she said it, Her voice held the familiar tremor of fear, but also the weight of unyielding resolve. Joe took in her expression the mixture of worry and hope, and he realized that his own fears were dwarfed under the mantle of collective aspirations. "Risk is part of the game," Joe responded, finding a steadiness in his voice he didn't know he had. "If we don't act, we're already defeated. The time for fear has passed. Every day we stay silent, we let them tighten their hold. I won't be quiet anymore." The room erupted in murmurs, a blend of fear and contemplation swirling in the air. Joe stepped forward, feeling a surge of inspiration wash over him. "Let us begin with a plan, even a small one. We have a community here." The confidence unfurling within him was almost tangible. He sensed the shift in energy, a growing acceptance, a burgeoning resolve forming among those around him. Yet in the back of his mind echoed Mike's words, a shadow of caution that he couldn't fully dismiss. His ambitious ideas felt powerful, but the consequences were ever more daunting. Could this blossoming courage be believed? Or was it a flimsy facade, too delicate to withstand outside pressures? Within that uncertainty lay a kernel of truth. This was the crux of his personal development. He had always been a part of this community, watching rather than leading. But now, as he glanced around the barn and met the expectant eyes of the farmers, he realized that this moment, fraught with risks, was also an opportunity to prove to himself and to them that he could transform confidence into action. As thoughts of practical next steps filled the air, no longer just whispers but rising with urgency, something inside him solidified. He had been walking a tightrope, but here, as the night deepened around them, he felt himself push through the fog of doubt. What he hadn't anticipated was how quickly he would have to confront the pragmatics of this newfound leadership. Would the oligarchs respond with intimidation or shock at this collective uprising? Would the other farmers stand with him or sit on the sidelines? With resolve mingling with understanding, he faced these questions, ready to take the next step. A moment of silence swept through the room, and Joe felt the gravity of his choice. He took a deep breath, bracing himself for the confrontation that would unfold. As plans solidified in rapid succession, the night darkened. He knew that soon enough they would be tested harshly. But amidst the rising tide of determination, another feeling crept in. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on a precipice, one that could lead to devastating consequences or untold empowerment. In that charged silence, Joe sensed the stirring of a storm, and he was ready to face it, even as the clouds began to gather. What would they dare to initiate? What adversaries lay ahead, waiting to challenge his nascent leadership? The moment swelled with a sense of inevitability, urging him forward into uncharted territory. The steps ahead were uncertain, but a resolute spirit was forming, ready to confront whatever came next. Joe awoke the next morning with a mixture of unease and excitement swirling in his chest. As he stepped out onto the porch, the familiar sights of morning in the rural landscape greeted him, but they felt different now. Each whisper of the wind, every sound of nature, resonated with the weight of his newfound responsibility. He was no longer merely Joe, a farmer fumbling for a way to keep his family afloat. He was becoming a man who dared to challenge the status quo. The realization rolled over him with waves of doubt and determination. He considered his first day as the catalyst for change. Joe had abstractly understood that the oligarchs held power, but facing them felt like preparing for a storm without knowing if he was the one who would ultimately be swept away by it. It wasn't just about battling faceless entities anymore. It was about standing firm for the people who depended on him, his friends, his family. The barn meetings had ignited something dormant within him. Pushing aside the budding dread, he gathered the notes he had scribbled last night. Each idea felt like a stepping stone. Today, he would reach out to his fellow farmers one by one. He needed to articulate an action plan that wasn't just enthusiasm. It needed substance, clarity, and courage. The first call was to Clara. He could picture her resolute gaze and quick mind. After a few rings, she answered, her voice laced with curiosity. "Joe, did you're still thinking about the outreach?" The straightforward question rattled around in his mind, but he met it head-on. "Yes. I think we should formalize our plans. Start small, then escalate if it feels right. Maybe even organize town hall meetings, something that can draw attention. Town hall? You're serious? She asked, tension creeping into her tone. That puts a target on our backs. Yes, he acknowledged, letting the weight of the reality sink in. But I believe it's necessary. Gathering people could empower us, but we have to be smart. I want you to help lead the communications. Joe could feel her hesitation through the silence. I don't know, Joe. What if there are consequences? What if they retaliate? Her worries hit him like a gust of cold air. Joe paused, contemplating the implications. He had to believe that this was worth the risk. I won't deny the risk, Clara. But if we don't act, we'll be on our knees forever without even a fight. Let us not let fear bind us. Discussions of logistics and strategy flowed between them as they brainstormed ideas for the meeting. As Joe hung up, clarity washed over him. It wasn't just about fighting the oligarchs anymore. It was about empowering his community to realize their agency. He could already envision the farmers sharing their stories, experiences of struggle and resilience. The shiny tractors, the price of seed, the weather, all these mundane conversations needed to transform into something much bigger. People's narratives needed to interweave, creating a powerful tapestry of defiance. He was beginning to see his own life experiences not as burdens but as potential fuel for the fire he was trying to ignite. As he walked through the rows of crops later that afternoon, Joe couldn't shake the feeling that he was not only shaping the course of his life but others as well. Yet, with each step, his heart raced. Had he readied himself for the inevitable pushback? The situation was complex, woven with layers of ambition and caution, but the fire within him urged him forward. He returned home, the weight of gathered thoughts swirling in his mind. As he readied himself for bed, he couldn't escape the shadows of doubt. Could he unite them, or would he only serve to isolate himself in failure? The storm he sensed building was no longer external. It loomed within him as he navigated through the fallout of leadership. Tomorrow would come, bringing more decisions and consequences. Joe had awakened something new in himself, but he felt the line between triumph and catastrophe blurring dangerously close. With uncertainty creeping in again, he understood he was on the cusp of a real confrontation. Soon it would be time to put his convictions into action. What awaited him in the arena of public opinion? And would he have the strength to continue facing the challenges to come? Joe Thompson stood at the edge of the fields, surveying the land that had been his life's work and now, his battleground. The rhythmic hum of the farming equipment felt like an echo of commitment and determination. Today, he decided, would mark a pivotal moment in his journey from weary farmer to fervent activist. His path had transformed, no longer shrouded in fear but illuminated by the promise of collective action. The day was crisp, the sun casting a golden hue over the crops he had tended for years. With newfound assurance, he gathered the farmers for the first town hall meeting, their apprehension palpable in the air. As faces turned toward him, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, yet he fueled that weight into urgency. "Thank you all for coming," Joe began, his voice steady, reverberating against the barn's wooden beams. "We're here because we can't be silent any longer. Our way of life, our legacies, they depend on us taking a stand. We've been pushed into a corner for too long, but today marks our first step toward reclaiming our future." The room buzzed with hesitation, but Joe pressed forward. "I have evidence documents revealing the corruption woven by our town's elite. They plan to exploit and dismantle what our families have built over generations." He presented the files he had painstakingly collected, handing them around the room for all to see. As disbelief turned to realization, the energy shifted. Conversations ignited. Whispers of agreement filled the space. Joe watched as determination gradually replaced the skepticism in their eyes. "Together, we can't merely complain, we need to organize," he continued, heart racing, echoing his conviction. "Let us create a coalition, harness the strength of our stories, and invite the wider community to join us in demanding accountability. People need to see the truth about what's happening here." At first, the farmers listened with guarded expressions, But as Joe shared anecdotes of resilience from his father and his own experiences, a sense of solidarity ignited. He outlined the plan for community engagement, emphasizing the importance of unity as they faced the oligarchs together. As discussions unfolded, Joe encouraged every farmer present to share their stories, building a narrative of collective struggle. Within that powerful exchange lay the heart of their community. Their familial bonds transcended generations, stories weaving a tapestry of courage and defiance. The uncertainty that loomed overhead began to dissipate as hope swelled. But Joe knew that the oligarchs would not take this uprising lightly. The thought threatened to eclipse the joy of unity. He had witnessed the imposing power they wielded. However, his sense of responsibility burned fiercely. He had confronted Mike's doubts, but now he felt the weight of external threats more pronounced. Would they retaliate? Days turned into weeks of organizing and planning. The farmers rallied, gathering signatures, sharing stories across town, and igniting open discussions. Joe noticed growth in his leadership, an evolution that led him to checkpoints he hadn't fathomed before. Each meeting reinforced his emerging identity as a leader, not just a farmer. As the momentum built, Joe found his voice resonating beyond the confines of the barn. They formed committees, strategies were executed with precision, and communities began to take notice. Joe felt a transformative energy coursing through him. This was not just about him anymore. It was a movement fueled by the shared aspiration for justice. Then word came. The oligarchs were prepared to confront them. At a town hall meeting, a delegation of their opponents arrived, arrogance simmering just beneath the surface. Joe stood before the group, fueled by a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. The trepidation tugged at his stomach, but he anchored himself on the ground of solidarity he had forged. Today, he declared, showcasing the unity formed through struggle, we bring these truths to light. The oligarchs attempted to dismantle his arguments with intimidation, speaking over him and dismissing his presentations as mere discontent. But other farmers stood behind Joe, countering their rhetoric with stories of loss and betrayal, emboldening the community to rally against the looming oppression. It's time for you to remember who this land truly belongs to, Joe asserted, unyielding in his belief. Their confrontation resonated deeply within him. The moment felt monumental, a blend of personal victory and collective empowerment. Victory would depend not only on this encounter but on systematic change, and that began today, rooted in their courage to stand together. It was the culmination of his transformation from a solitary farmer to a beacon of collective hope. The discussion that ensued marked a pivotal shift in their small town, igniting a community spirit forged on newfound trust and collective goals. Joe left that meeting with a profound sense of achievement, an achievement that transcended him alone. Each face in the room represented a voice now unshackled, courage replacing apprehension. The initial fear had morphed. They had become advocates for their future. Home that evening, he paused on the porch, gazing at the vast expanse of crops. The transformations of the past months had reshaped not only the community but himself. Joe Thompson stood tall, no longer a specter of despair. He was a driven leader. He felt a tangible connection to generations past, embodying their spirit while igniting hope that pulsed toward future generations. The last rays of sunlight danced across the field, and as darkness fell, Joe understood he had achieved more than an act of defiance. He had cultivated an unwavering belief in himself, his family, and his community. The road ahead would surely present challenges, but he was ready to navigate it head held high, voice unwavering. What awaited their community was impossible to predict, but as the stars twinkled softly overhead, he felt a profound gratitude for clarity and purpose. He had discovered not just how to stand against injustice, but also who he truly was: a proud farmer, an advocate, and a champion of transformation. Now, more than ever, it was time to forge ahead. You need to subscribe now to ensure you witness the powerful stories of personal triumph that shape us all. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and inspire others to join this journey. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Joe's courageous transformation. Every insight matters. And please, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this exhilarating conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to support this channel. Transformations like Joe's deserve to be celebrated.